Running the RusEFI simulator. To start the simulator, click Manual Software Simulator. The software simulator is a full virtual software simulator with absolutely no hardware, so nothing has to be plugged in. It's basically a try before you buy simulator. We download the RusEFI bundle, we extract it, and we should get this. We start our RusEFI console. Because this is all software and no hardware, we don't need to worry about our COM ports. And we just start our virtual simulator. We see green RPM, so we are connected. And the first thing we look at is our engine sniffer. And here are some of the pulses going in and out of our software based on our setup. First we have here is trigger 1, which looks like a cam. Trigger 2, which looks like a crank. 4 coil outputs. 2 injector outputs. And a map. These pulses are the time where the map does an averaging reading. Different engine settings will have different configurations here. Like if this was a 4-cylinder, we have 4 coil channels, so we assume sequential ignition, and 2 injector channels, which we would assume are paired injectors. And if we change an engine configuration, like go to presets, pick this one, go yes, and go back to engine sniffer, we now have 2 ignition and 2 injection. So it must be waste spark and paired injectors. I'll quickly go back to our first engine that we started with by restarting. The first thing we can do is change the RPM. Just punch in RPM, space, and we'll try 2000. We notice our injection pulses get wider, higher RPM requires more fuel, and more ignition duration, and possibly it's slightly advancing. You can go to table editor, select fuel, look at VE efficiency. You can see the change from 1200 RPM to 2000 changes the fuel. The injector pulse gets wider. Coincidentally, you can change this table here, like you would in TunerStudio. It's just it's not as nice. Back to the engine sniffer. Seems like this RPM is limited by this RPM threshold. So if we try 3000, you'll see nothing happen. Let's go back to 2000. We'll change our RPM threshold to 8000. And we'll try 4000 RPM. And we get even more injection and more ignition. Next we'll change sensor inputs and see what happens. First we'll reset the RPM to 1200. And go to the gauges tabs. We now want to change the coolant temperature. So we'll double click on the gauge to make it floating. Go back to engine sniffer. We have minus 10 degrees on the gauge. Our injector duration is about 2.86, and then we'll max it right to the left. You'll notice the gauge slowly goes up and these slowly change. And we're now at 3 milliseconds. Let's try a different gauge. We'll try the map and change the load. As the gauge goes up, the duration goes up of the injectors. And again, different engine configuration setups produce different results. Like this first one doesn't use the map, so you can change the map as much as you want and nothing will happen on the engine sniffer. Other things that might cause things not to work is if you're out of the range of the sensor in the configuration. Like here, warning, unrealistic coolant sensor. It's seeing a value that's off the table. Sometimes you can change the gauge to a reasonable number and clear the warning. If you want a more detailed explanation, you can go to messages, but that's a bit above our pay grade. Like before the sliders were added to the gauges a couple of days ago, these were the text commands you had to type into the box here. Just where the V is, you'd add a number between 0 and 5, because this is digital and it runs between 0 and 5 volts. You also have to know what reading correlates with what voltage. There are a few basic commands to query the console, like here, manual software dev console commands. It's now just the console, where you type in these commands. If you come to general, there are a few general ones. You can type in help, list of supported commands. Hello, prints a version of the firmware. We'll try that. And we have a bit of information here. We have our RPM command, which may be changed to a slider on the gauge soon. There's our set engine type and others, which I'm not going to go into because it's easier in TunerStudio. Connecting the simulator to TunerStudio. If you have a paid version of TunerStudio, you can connect straight through with its communication settings. But if you have the free version, you have to connect with a third-party program. Currently, connecting to the free version of TunerStudio is broken. There is word that this might be fixed up on the beta version of TunerStudio after version 3.0.60.54, but we don't know when that will be or if it will actually fix this. So currently we have to go to an earlier version of the bundle. If you want to try it, you have to go to this download page and select 2015-05-03 and download that. Next we have to download a HW virtual serial port, which is here. Just select the single version, download it and install. The install is fairly straightforward, so I won't go through it. Next we go to our RusEFI bundle 2015-05-03 and extract that. We run our RusEFI console. Start simulator. Allow access if you need it through your firewall and your antivirus. You might have to restart the console to clear all the security measures. We have green 1200 RPM, but we'll change that just to make sure it's working. And it's running. Next we open our HW virtual serial port. We go to our simulation page. So you log in. Just press OK. Our COM port number is not that important, so long as we match it in TunerStudio. But the IP address, this number and this number, have to mimic these ones. So just type them in, and then we create the COM. We'll go to Device Manager. It's not necessary for you, but this will show you that it's running. Next we start TunerStudio. This is the stable version 3.0.28. We'll create a new project. Call this 2015-05-03. Now we have to browse that 2015 bundle and pick our INI file. Next, we'll do Celsius as usual. Now this is where you've got to match your COM port to COM port 3, like in the virtual serial port. You can actually test the port if you want to. If it's successful, you can go next and then finish. We're now connected to TunerStudio, and there's our 2000 RPM that was in our console. Next we'll change our coolant temperature. This is on 70 degrees. You'll notice this console has less tabs than the other one, but we go to gauges, open our coolant, change this to another number, 47 degrees. It's now 47 degrees. Let's go back to the engine sniffer. We'll change the RPM back to 1200 because this old version jitters a bit. Notice the tacho drop. We now go to engine, base tune engine settings, and we notice our injection mode is in batch. And if you look on our sniffer, there's only 2 injection channels. Now we'll change this to sequential, burn, and you'll notice 2 more injection channels start up. So you can see changing gauges in the simulator will change TunerStudio, and changing settings in TunerStudio will change the console. Now it's up to you to explore the 2 and get familiar with the software. If you have connection problems, you can check the connection with Telnet. First install Telnet, control panel, programs and features, turn window features on, select Telnet client and go OK. Start the console, start simulator, start the terminal, and it's Telnet localhost 29001. If it goes blank except for the cursor, that's alright. You have to close it down to free up the Telnet connection. Next we open up the virtual serial port, make sure it's running, terminal again, Telnet localhost again, but 29002 this time, and go capital T, Shift T, and if some writing comes up, that works too. Close that terminal to free up the Telnet again, and try again by starting TunerStudio. If you get failures on any of the Telnet connections, you know it's something to do with the connections. And that covers the simulator.